is time for Dying to Bloom with your host, Carrie Potter.
Good morning. Welcome to Dying to Bloom. I'm Carrie Potter. I missed doing this show the last couple of months when the fourth Thursday fell on holidays. November was Thanksgiving it fell on, and December it fell on Christmas. So it's a new year, and I'm back. This show is sponsored by the Green Cemetery Fund through the Rockland Community Foundation, and I ask your consideration in contributing to this tax-free fund to help bring a green cemetery to the Rockland County area. I'm also proud that the Green Cemetery Fund was featured in the Rockland Community Foundation's Profile in Giving this month. You can visit rocklandgives.org to read the Green Cemetery Fund profile and, of course, to make your tax-deductible donation. The Green Cemetery Fund was also featured in this month's Natural Awakenings magazine. So if you're out and about, grab a copy and look for that article. I need to pause for a moment and give thanks to Jeff Lewis for his help in promoting this fund and coordinating these shows on YouTube. If you missed Dying to Bloom or you want to catch previous shows, you can go to YouTube, type in Dying to Bloom, and listen to previous programs. So thank you, Jeff Lewis, for taking care of that. And also, if you're looking for help with some PR and marketing for your business or your cause, give Jeff Lewis a call. His office number is 845-535-3453, or you can find him on Facebook through Group M Inc. I believe my guest is on the line, but I just want to also quick talk a moment about Facebook. Dying to Bloom also has a new Facebook page. We currently have 99 likes, so please, if you're on Facebook, go and click like on Dying to Bloom just to get me to that 100. And if you have any questions or comments about the show, you can email me at dyingtobloom@gmail.com. Now, again, Dying to Bloom is a monthly show that talks about burial and funeral options, the choices we make, the environmental impact, the cultural influences, and the legislation on these issues. Making the right burial or funeral choice starts with being able to talk about death, something we're not too good at here in the United States. It's a difficult topic, probably because we tend to associate death with pain and suffering. We can't really control it, and nor do we fully understand it. The thought of losing someone we love is too much to bear. You often hear people saying, "Don't talk that way, you're going to be fine." The comedian George Burns captured this attitude of denial when he said, "I don't believe in dying, it's been done. I'm working on a new exit." Let's be open to the topic. Like in some other cultures, the Mexicans, for example, celebrate El Día de Todos los Santos, All Saints Day, and El Día de los Muertos, All Souls Day. And these festivities come from an ancient indigenous practice centered on the belief that the souls of the dead return each year to party with the living. So we're going to lighten up a little bit with today's topic. Why talk about death? My guest is Elaine Voci, PhD. She's a life coach in private practice and a certified life cycle celebrant. She teaches workshops on navigating life's transition. She facilitates death cafes in her local community and writes a blog on her website, elainevoci.com. I found out about you through the internet because I came across an article or a blog that you've written, 10 Reasons Why I Want to Talk About Death. And before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you're not located in the Rockland County area. Where are you, and what do you do, and why did you write an article about that topic?
Sure. I live in a town called Westfield, Indiana, and my private life coaching practice is located in a neighboring town, a next-door city, actually, called Carmel, Indiana. And I have been a life coach in private practice for a number of years, and then last year graduated as a life cycle celebrant from a school there in the East Coast. And during that time, I was introduced to death cafes, and that's what intrigued me. And then eventually I started hosting them, and there was a newspaper story about the cafes. There's my cafe in Carmel, and then there's also in Indianapolis one that meets a little less frequently. And that's what led me to write the article, because I think, as you were saying so well in your introduction, Carrie, there's a lot of discomfort in our culture around death. And the reasons why I want to talk about death make it, I think, really clear to people that death is a natural process. You know, we don't have to keep it in the shadows. We don't have to be afraid of it. You know, we can begin to meet and talk about it. And and so that's my interest in it, and a little bit about my background.
And for those listening here in the local area in Rockland County, I just want to mention that death cafes are not exclusive to Indiana. That's actually something that's happening worldwide. And there has been an article in our local paper here because there have been death cafes held in the Westchester area. I haven't seen any right here in Rockland, but Westchester is right over the other side of the Tappan Zee Bridge, not too far from us.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about what a death cafe is?
Sure. And as you pointed out, it is a kind of global phenomena. You know, it's almost regarded as a movement, if you will. The cafes, just briefly, were started in Europe by a Swiss sociologist, Bernard Cortez. He started running them and hosting them, so we credit him with the concept of Death Cafe. And then they were picked up in London by a man named John Underwood, who's gone a great length toward kind of organizing it and making it a more consistent experience for people. So what's a death cafe? Well, first let's notice the pairing there of the word death with cafe. Cafe connotes a warm, comfortable place where we go, we're relaxed when we go there, we have something delicious to eat and drink, and often we have good conversation. So to partner that connotation and those images with death, a conversation about death, really gets at the heart of a death cafe. It is simplicity itself. People come together, they gather to talk about death with an eye, or to basically increase their awareness of death with an eye toward helping people make the most of their lives. So just like death and life are so closely related, in my mind, they're two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about death, we are inevitably going to be talking about life and how we live. So we may get into talking about how we want to die, or how we want to prepare ourselves, or how we want to have conversation with our family and our friends to express our wishes for end of life. But just as we're talking about those things, it also focuses us on how do I want to live? What is the life legacy that I want to leave? What are the things that are meaningful to me that I want to engage in? And, you know, death is part of life. By thinking about it and preparing for it, we're not going to hasten it. You know, there's a great, you said a little lighter conversation, but there's a great quote about when you talk about, pregnancy, just talking about it doesn't make you pregnant, and talking about death doesn't make you die. You know, so the same notion is we get death out of the closet, we think about it in this safe and comfortable environment. Typically, groups of people come to the cafe that are strangers. I've noticed that women tend to bring a friend, but many times people come and they don't know anybody else there. And I think that alone is a factor in helping people loosen up and talk, because they don't know anyone there. It's almost like, you know, there's nothing you have to protect or defend. And then the environment is welcoming. Death cafes don't cost anything. They're free to the people that come. Death cafes are free of ideology. So while I facilitate regular death cafes, I introduce and guide discussion, I'm not there to lead people toward any conclusions about death or the afterlife. And everyone is asked to respect one another's views.
Well, first of all, for those listening that may be interested in death cafes, I know it's probably sounds new to a lot of people, and thank you for keeping the radio on at this point. This is a difficult topic. But if you are interested in learning more about death cafes, you can Google. I know that they have a website. Do you know what that is, Elaine?
Yes, it's www.deathcafe, singular, deathcafe.com. And that's John Underwood's site, so it's the international site. It gives a lot of information for local events, and it even has a map on there to show you where the cafes are being held around the world.
Well, it's certainly something I'm curious about, and I'm going to look into attending one. I did find out that the one in Westchester, the last one held was, I believe, back in October. But I guess if I just keep checking the website, they'll let me know of other ones that are coming up. And I've noticed that they're also in New York City and other areas that are a little bit more of a drive. But I would like to experience one and find out what it's about. I also wanted to mention that when I was researching the topic of talking about death through the internet, I came across another woman who's an author like you and a life coach, Judith Johnson, who writes for the Huffington Post. And I just wanted to share a couple of the items that she pointed out and get your feedback on them as well. But she says...
Great.
Individually and collectively, we're paying an enormous emotional and financial price for being silenced by our society's taboo against talking about death and dying. Where other societies educate their members about the reality of death and the process of dying and grieving, we do not. And here are some of the reasons that she points out to consider as far as facts that we bear and the costs that we incur. 80% of Americans do not put their personal affairs in order before they die. 2, in 2009, I realize this is a little old, but in 2009, Medicare paid $55 billion just for doctor and hospital bills for the last 2 months of patients' lives. That's more than the budget for the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of Education. And most of the bills are paid for by the federal government with few or no questions asked. And she also quoted a 60 Minutes episode that was about the cost of dying. So, I found that an interesting fact. As well as a majority of Americans say they want to die at home, but 75% die in a hospital or a nursing home.
There is an excellent book that I would like to refer you to and your listeners to. It's on the bestseller list right now, and it's written by a physician. His name is Dr. Atul Gawande, and the title is Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End. And this is an account that gets at more recent statistics and data and the process that many American families go through at the end of life when the person who's dying has not made their wishes clear, or when the family gets into some kind of conflict over what to do or what not to do because those wishes aren't made clear. He is a physician himself and has he writes articles for the New York Times, and he's had a previous bestseller in addition to this book. His father is a physician, and so part of his book is autobiographical because it tells the journey of his father's illness and eventual passing and what happened in his own family, even as educated and, prepared for the end of his life. And so I would recommend that book very strongly, Being Mortal.
Being Mortal. I'm writing that down so I don't forget.
Yeah, sure.
Also, another thing that was pointed out by Judith Johnson is many doctors view their inability to cure a patient as a professional failure and therefore are reluctant to suggest palliative care even when they know there's little or no hope of recovery. Largely as a result, the average stay in hospice care is just 2 weeks.
Yes, that's true. Mm-hmm.
You know, I found that interesting, and you know, you ask yourself, is there a right or wrong on that? Would you want to know if there really wasn't much hope for you, and how truthful should the doctors be, and is there such a thing as giving false hope? You know, it's a difficult topic, but you know that plays into, I believe, the cost of extending medical care.
Absolutely, and you know, eventually I think we are going to get to a place where we used to be, more than 100 years ago, a society where people died at home. More people died at home than ever died in a hospital. And families were united in their generations. Many generations lived together in the same house. So when the person died, there was a lot more preparation for that, a lot more frankness and candor in regard to what was happening, because they could see that experience unfolding in their own eyes, you know, every day. And when the person died, the family would take responsibility to wash the body, dress the body, and then an undertaker would come and bring typically a pine box, a simple casket or coffin, and the wake would be held there in the house. And they would hang a black wreath outside on the front door so that everyone would know someone had passed away in that family. We will eventually come back. We are winding our way back to that, not necessarily that scenario, because families don't necessarily live together anymore, but we will take from that time, that candor, that openness, that conversation about death and dying. I think that's where we're headed as a society. I was a volunteer. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to agree with you that it does tend to be trending back that way, and thus...
Yeah, the green burials are a good example of that. That's another indicator, I think, of how people are thinking differently about death and wanting to prepare differently than we have in the past. I was trained as a hospice volunteer, and for 3 years I just recently concluded a time of being a facilitator of a bereavement group for widows and widowers in a hospice. And the idea that people hold off on hospice until very late is a sad commentary, I think, and one of the outcomes when we don't prepare and we aren't candid. There is a kind of liberation that comes with knowing that, okay, you know, the end isn't, we don't know to the day, to the hour, but we know that we're going to die. Life is finite. And when a physician says, you know, I'd like to understand better what makes, you know, what makes it meaningful to you, and what would it take for you to feel more comfortable as we approach this stage. And it's interesting when doctors, and you'll see this if you read Dr. Gowenda's book, when people are asked that question, then they can begin to define for themselves what's meaningful. You know, for one man, he was willing to go into hospice provided that he could have chocolate ice cream and he could watch television every day. That was the quality of life he wanted. You know, but if we don't ask those questions, then if the person is our parent, for example, or a spouse, and something happens and they face a crisis, we'll know how to answer those questions about how much care needs to be given and how much help needs to be given from a palliative care standpoint. But if we don't have those conversations, then we're in the dark, and that's, I think, where a lot of difficulties arise.
Elaine, I know we only have a few minutes with you because you do have an appointment this morning. I would like to open up the phone lines if anyone would like to call and comment at 845-362-0013. If you have a question for Elaine Voci, again, is a life coach in private practice, a certified life cycle celebrant, and she is a Death Cafe facilitator as well in her community in Indiana. If you want to share why you think so many people are uncomfortable talking about death, or do you share that discomfort, or any other question that may arise or topic, please feel free to give us a call. Talking about death seems to make it less scary. As you were talking about hospice, I've personally had experience in both scenarios. My mother passed of cancer. She reached a point where the doctor pretty much said she had 3 months left, and my mother seemed to just accept that and almost lived the 3 months to the day, I think. And we ended up having hospice care at home, and it was difficult, but in some ways it did bring the family together, and being in the room when she did pass again was difficult, but in other ways I thought it was kind of miraculous to see. I compared it to life coming in when my child was born, and seeing life go out as I lost my mother. There seemed to be a miraculous feeling to it, and I feel blessed to be able to share that with her. We're going to pause for a moment and go to the phone lines. Good morning, you're on Dying to Bloom.
Hi, Carrie. Elaine?
Yes.
Oh, it's Judy. Hi.
Hi, Judy.
This is a great show. Very valuable. I wish there were a cafe in Rockland County, or maybe we should start one. I think it's something that people avoid, as you've spoken about, in this culture anyway. And I also had the experience of my mom dying at home, and she suffered horribly for 3 years with she didn't have esophageal cancer. That was my father's mother. She had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And my father was a doctor, so he tried every trick in the book to keep her alive. And in the end, he maybe regretted all these procedures, because she used to say that the cure was worse than the disease. And it was it's so painful to watch, and I'm sure that we couldn't conceive of the pain that she was going through. She got down to it. For a while, she looked like a skeleton when she passed, and for a while, I hated Halloween because I couldn't look at skeletons.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, Judy. I was going to say also, on the other hand, I have a cousin that passed early. She was young. She was in her 40s, and she was battling an illness, and she ended up passing and not really being able to talk about death. To her, talking about it was giving up fighting her illness. And I in some ways that was kind of difficult on the family. When she did pass, we didn't know what she wanted as far as funeral plans, and we weren't as prepared as a family.
Yeah, that's really sad. My father did eventually remarry, and then his second wife, after he predeceased her, but she was much more prepared for death. She had hospice in, and a friend of hers came in from California who had a belief in an afterlife, and sometimes that's just a very comforting thing.
Well, thank you for calling, Judy. I'm going to have to move on. We do have another caller, and I know, Elaine, you have to go soon. So, good morning. You're on Dying to Bloom.
Hey, Carrie. It's Lenny. I have a simplistic way to maybe see why people are so fearful of death. I'm sure you know that I teach people how to bring a dead person back to life with CPR, and I've never heard your show because I'm always teaching, but I just got in the car after teaching 60 10-year-olds. But, if we go on vacation, we're sad when it ends. When the school year ends, the kid's sad that they're saying goodbye to friends. When you move from one job to the next, you can be sad that you're leaving people behind and saying goodbye to things, to memories. And death is the ultimate goodbye. And it's the degree of sadness that people, I guess, inside know they're going to experience. And that's, I think, where the fear comes in. How to handle that sadness, that goodbye. And we just have never had any kind of training or insight into that. But it's that saying goodbye. But many people often will say they're in a better place now. So maybe we're getting to where people understand it better. But it is scary, and it's that fear of the goodbye. That's my belief, that, that sadness is so overwhelming at times that that's where that fear can often come from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, and that's why I think it's nice that we have this movement in opening it up and preparing a little more by having these conversations.
Yeah, and that's the only way to learn is to talk about it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I think
We don't have enough of that on this topic. People are it's supposed to be taboo. Well, I don't know where that thought came from, but we need to open up more and learn how we can deal with each other and how we can deal with things like that. So I think this idea you have with this show is great.
Thanks, Lenny.
Take care.
Elaine, did you go ahead.
Yeah, one thought that I had is when people come to the Death Cafe, we do an evaluation at the end. It's a short form that they fill out, but they do talk about, one question is give 3 adjectives, for what you felt in the cafe. And here are some of the words that people use. Informative, interesting, heartfelt, warm, thought-provoking, comforting, enlightening, pleasant. People are liberated. I would describe it that way. People are liberated when they come through a Death Cafe conversation. These are typically 2 hours in length, and it's driven by the people that come. It's not a bereavement group. It's not a grief counseling group or anything that would be helpful for someone who's recently had a loss. But it is a liberating experience for people generally, and they keep coming back. They want to come back again and again. So I encourage you and hope that one of the things that happens is that you have a Death Cafe in your own neighborhood, your own area, a little closer so you don't have to travel. And I think with a little bit of training and preparation and watching some others and talking with people like myself, I can volunteer right now to chat with you or anyone who wants to organize one and help out just based on my own experience. But this idea of being liberated, it's like a weight lifting for people to make death a part of conversation about life.
Well, it's certainly something I'll consider, but I would like to attend one myself before I would commit to facilitating
absolutely.
one. And
Absolutely.
I know you have an appointment to go to. I just wanted to point out one thing that you have in your list of reasons why you want to talk about death. And number 1, you actually list as, we prepare for many significant life transitions, investing time and treasure in recognizing births, weddings, graduations, and funerals, yet we actively avoid and fail to prepare for dying. Now, someday I may do a show about other cultures, because this is also a cultural thing, because not all cultures have that attitude. But I wanted to thank you for the work that you do in helping people to have the conversation and to be more prepared and to be less frightened. And I would like, before you leave us, if you can just let us know how people can find out more about you and perhaps even find this article that I've been referring to.
Sure. I have a website. It's ElaineVoci.com, ELAINE, V as in Victor, OCI.com. The blogs are there, and that article is out there. There are also information about the Death Cafes and many other topics that relate to making transitions in life. I think one of the things that has appealed to me about becoming a celebrant is the work of a celebrant is to help people acknowledge those milestones in life, all of the aspects of life, the whole spectrum. So we want to celebrate, we want to have a memorable ceremony that helps mark a time of change in our lives. And so that's how folks can get hold of me, and I'd be happy if anyone wanted to email me through the website. We could have a conversation that way as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and I will be in touch with you and let you know the status on a Rockland County Death Cafe.
Good. All right, great. And I do want to mention my the school, the Celebrant Foundation and Institute, is where I received my certificate. That may also be of interest to other people listening. So thank you very much, and thank you for the good work you're doing, Carrie. It's a really broad show that you bring to people with so many different interesting topics. So I wish you well with it, and thanks for the invitation. It's been really nice.
Thank you again, Elaine Voci.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, we just have a few minutes left. I did keep Elaine a little longer than I believe she planned. But perhaps, let's just think about for a moment, talking about death can help us be better prepared. It can help us as a society reevaluate the costs of end-of-life care. Especially, of course, when someone we love is close to the end, and to help us prepare, help our loved ones feel less isolated because we can't handle talking about it. These are all issues that you don't think about every day. I appreciate you again staying with me on this episode of Dying to Bloom. The next show will air on February 26th at 10:10 a.m. And as we close out the show, we broke through the taboo today and talked about death. You may not be ready for a death cafe, but I hope you can, as our guest, Elaine Voci, does, see death as a vital reminder to live authentically with gratitude and full awareness. And may the impermanent nature of life make it easier to focus on what matters most. I'm Carrie Potter. Thank you for listening. This is Dying to Bloom.